My name is Olivia Alexander, and I'm your Texas State University Student Body President. It is fitting that I'm introducing our speaker tonight, as the topic for today's lecture is about piracy and presidents. I, Student Body President, get to introduce a Texas State treasure and pirate expert, Dr. Bryan Glass. Dr. Glass has been teaching in the history department at Texas State for the past 12 years. In that time, he has risen through the ranks to his current position as Professor of Instruction. Dr. Glass received his PhD from the University of Texas at Austin in Modern British and British Imperial History after completing his master's degree at the University of Cambridge. He is the author of 2 books, including The Scottish Nation at Empire's End, as well as his numerous articles. In addition, Dr. Glass is the founder of the Britain and the World Book Series, Journal, and Annual Conference. But he is best known at Texas State for his prowess within the classroom. Over the past 12 years, he has won 8 teaching awards. And in a poll last year, Texas State students said he taught 2 of the 16 most interesting classes on campus. He was the only faculty member to have taught 2 classes voted for in this poll. Those included his signature course, Piracy Through the Ages, and another little class on pandemics. His intellectual interests are wide and varied, and he is currently at work on a book very near and dear to his heart, tentatively titled Diabetes, Our Modern Plague. We, however, just like to refer to him as the Pirate Professor. Please welcome Dr. Glass to the stage.
Thanks, Olivia. Appreciate it. How y'all doing? Can you hear me? Yes. Good. Welcome to Piracy and Presidents. That was a wonderful introduction. I really appreciate that, Olivia. I'm using the mic. I usually don't use the mic, so if I have any sort of issues, forgive me. But it's appropriate that the last thing she talked about was diabetes, me being a type 1 diabetic, because my glucose is actually starting to go low at exactly the wrong time. So yeah, I'll drink a little bit of Sprite before we get started. All right, so this is what you're here for, pirates. Before we really kind of get into the meat of the presidents and pirates, what we need to do is first watch this.
Come check out Dr. Glass's Pirates lecture. He's super funny.
Dr. Glass is dramatic and hilarious.
My favorite pirate is Ned Lowe.
I would tell friends when I left that classroom what I learned that day, and all of them are like, I want to take this class because I want to learn whatever the heck you talked about that day.
It took a long time to make that, by the way. A lot of people were involved. I think, what was that, maybe 3 months, Jasmine? Something like that. So, yes, that's right. I have a hype video. This is the first time anyone has seen it outside of our small little cadre that's been working on it. But thank you to everyone involved. I will thank them all at the end. But let's start with the types of piracy, okay? Because there are 4 main types of piracy, and I think definitions are in order before we start getting into what presidents have to do with any of this. First of all is a pure pirate. All right? These are enemies of all mankind. They will go after anyone and everyone. They don't discriminate. All right? Their whole idea is to take as much plunder as they possibly can, seize as many ships as they can. And you are probably most aware of people like Blackbeard from the golden age of piracy. Also, there's Blackbeard. Calico Jack Rackham. The reason why I bring up Calico Jack is because his Jolly Roger is the one that we're using during the lecture tonight. The two crossed swords, that's Calico Jack. And why is Calico Jack so famous? Well, Calico Jack has two female pirates on board the ship with him, and Bonnie, who is his lover, all right, and Mary Read, who some say is Aunt Bonnie's lover. I don't know. I'm not touching that. Anyhow, they're pure pirates. They are going after anyone and everyone, and they are sailing during the golden age of piracy between 1715 and 1725. All right? But then the British government decides they need to be put out of business. And this is one of the people responsible. His name is Woodes Rogers. Is this freaking anyone out? Yeah. Oh, there's more. All right? This is AI for you. You want to know what AI can do? It can bring old portraits to life. Woodes Rogers was the governor of the Bahamas. And this is a big deal because the Bahamas, Nassau in the Bahamas, was actually founded as the Pirate Republic by Benjamin Hornigold. What a great pirate name, huh? Benjamin Hornigold? Doesn't get better than that. You were made to be a pirate. Anyhow, Benjamin Hornigold is running this Republic of Pirates where the pirates have a safe place where they can stop, they can fix their ships, they can sell their stolen booty, all right? And the British government decides they need to get rid of this. And who do they put in charge of that? Woodes Rogers. So that's why he's up here. But again, these are the pure pirates. Beyond the pure pirates, we have privateers. Privateers are state-sanctioned pirates. They're given letters of marque by their governments, and those letters of marque basically are their get-out-of-execution free card. If they get captured by one of the states that they have a letter of marque to attack, they must be treated as prisoners of war. They cannot just be summarily executed as pirates so often were. All right? So they have that level of protection. The only problem is that everything that they seize, they have to give a bit of it to the government that they're sailing for. All right? So they have to give up some of their ill-gotten gains. The third group, and this is the group that is going to most concern us tonight, are the corsairs. The corsairs are pirates who attack based on religion. All right, so we'll be talking a lot about the Barbary corsairs in North Africa. The Barbary corsairs in North Africa, they are Muslim and they are attacking Christian shipping mainly. All right, those are corsairs. The final group are buccaneers. Not really touching on buccaneers. Long story short, the buccaneers are French hunters on Hispaniola. The Spanish kicked them out of Hispaniola. They moved to Tortuga. And they're known for hunting small little creatures, capturing them, killing them, and then cooking them over an open flame. That's right, they're grillers. They grill their meat outside. Buccaneer comes from boucan, which is like a small little grill. And so the buccaneers are basically the French who lived on Hispaniola, moved to Tortuga. The Spanish come try to destroy all of their little animals that they're eating to get them off the island, and so then they decide to set their sights on Spanish shipping instead. All right? You're going to hunt our animals, we're going to hunt you. And that's exactly what they do. So those are the four main categories. Like I said before, the category that most concerns us today is going to be that of, I know Adam Smith's looking real freaky. Anyhow, is going to be that of the Corsairs. Why is Adam Smith up here? Well, when the United States declares its independence in 1776, all right, they do so at a time when Adam Smith has just published his book, Wealth of Nations. How many of you have read Wealth of Nations? Like 2 of you. Yeah, that sounds about right. Okay. Well, the founding fathers who were big into Enlightenment ideas would have all known the Wealth of Nations backwards and forwards. All right? It was a huge part of who they were and the country that they were trying to create. What did it do? Well, it was setting up an economic system that was not based on mercantilism. Okay? Now, mercantilism, for those of you who don't know, was the predominant economic way of thinking during the 18th century before Adam Smith. It believed that every economic transaction was a zero-sum game. What does that mean? It means that in every economic transaction, there is a winner and there is a loser. And both cannot equally win an economic transaction. Of course, this is complete and utter nonsense, but that's what they believed. And who would win? Well, the people who won were the ones who wound up with the money at the end, not the ones who wound up with the goods. Adam Smith turns this on its ear and says it's all about free trade. And if you have free and fair trade, there's absolutely no reason why everyone can't benefit from an economic transaction. And so the United States is founded based on this idea of free trade, and they want to engage in free trade absolutely everywhere. All right? However, the Barbary Corsairs aren't having it because they believe in tribute. Right? They live in a tributary world where free trade is anathema to their way of life, their way of thinking. And they will stop at nothing to continue to demand this tribute. So what does tribute mean? Well, from the time the Barbary regencies are founded in the 16th century, up until the time when the newly formed United States is trying to fight them off, they had been around for about 300 years. Founded by Khera Din and Arouge Barbarossa, 2 brothers. Their main economic way of life was to seize the ships of others passing, enslave the peoples on board said ships, and then ransom them back while taking all of the booty on board. All right? This was the way their system had worked for 300 years. And they weren't about to change it because the United States comes in and goes, we need to trade freely here. Let us trade freely. No. What happens is that these 3 main Barbary states say, okay, if you want to trade in the Mediterranean and you don't want your ships to be seized and you don't want your people to be enslaved, then you will pay us an annual tribute. That's the way this will work. So Adam Smith had played a major role in the way the Americans were thinking, and then the Americans decide, you know what, we really hate this piracy thing. We hate it so much, we are going to enshrine it in the Constitution. It's one of the only crimes that is actually forbidden via the Constitution. And here it is. It's Article 1, Section 8, Clause 10. The Congress shall have power to define and punish piracies and felonies committed on the high seas and offenses against the law of nations. Here comes George Washington for you. All right? And George Washington will come in as president at a time, obviously he's the first president, but this is a time of great weakness for the United States. The United States is extremely weak. And as soon as the United States gains its independence in 1783 from Britain, what happens? Well, guess what? The British had been paying tribute to the Barbary Corsairs. They then, and that gave protection to American shipping. As soon as the Americans are free, they don't have that protection anymore. So right off the bat, American ships are being seized in the Mediterranean. And you're like, okay, well, why does the U.S. have to continue to sail through the Mediterranean? Well, Thomas Jefferson would estimate that between 1/6 and 1/4 of all grain sold by the United States overseas was going into the Mediterranean. It was a huge market for a country that was excessively poor. They need that market, right? They're desperate for it. And so George Washington, who famously called the Barbary pirates, or the Barbary corsairs, a nest of banditti, winds up paying this ransom, if you will, this tribute to try to keep American shipping safe. However, it's not going to last, because Thomas Jefferson is going to rise up, form his own party, challenging the Federalists, and his new party will be dedicated to free trade, first and foremost. They don't want to pay for this, hands-off approach. And the writing is on the wall with the leader of Tripoli. Now you say, where's Tripoli? Here it is. It is modern-day Libya. These are the three Barbary states. Algiers is the largest, Tunis is the second largest, Tripoli is the third. And the United States have been paying a lot more tribute to both Algiers and Tunis, and had not been paying that much to Tripoli. So the Basha of Tripoli is a man named Yusuf Karamanli. And Yusuf says to the United States, you either start to pay up over 200,000 US dollars a year in tribute, which back then was a lot, or I'm going to start attacking US shipping, and I'm going to declare war on you. Yeah, exactly. So, the United States says, we're not going to pay it, and as a result, war is declared by Tripoli in February of 1801, just a few days before the newly elected Thomas Jefferson was to take office. All right? So, Jefferson comes in and he decides right off the bat, I'm going to attack this piratical scum. I am going to use cannons if necessary to take control of the situation. But he had a strategy. His strategy was called awe and talk. He was going to awe them by showing them the great naval might of the US Navy, and then that would bring them to the negotiating table, and all would be good. All right? It doesn't work that way. The United States sends a flotilla over right after Jefferson is elected, and it's not going to go all that well. Plus, Jefferson has an issue. Because Jefferson, for those of you who don't know, is a strict constructionist. He believes that you go by the absolute letter, the literal letter of everything stated in the Constitution, and you do not deviate from it. And within the Constitution, it says that he, as president, does not have the power to prosecute war without the intervention of Congress. All right? So he calls his cabinet together. It's like, hey, what do we do? And he gets some help. He gets some help from his Treasury Secretary, Albert Gallatin. Albert Gallatin argued that while the president could not declare war, if another nation, quote, puts us into that state, then the president has the right to use force to protect American interests. This was not in the Constitution. All right? But it's giving Jefferson power that he otherwise did not have. By the way, it's not just Gallatin who says that. I know you like how they smile every time. They always smile at the end. Yeah, the microphones. There you go. So, he's supported in this idea by Secretary of the Navy Robert Smith, Secretary of War Henry Dearborn, and Secretary of State James Madison. They all concur, and they say the president needs to have this power, that if someone declares war on us, we have the right to then be at war with them, and you don't have to involve Congress. All right? So this is truly the first time, as far as I can see, where the president is investing himself with powers that are not in the Constitution. So, Jefferson's using this on-talk strategy, and it leads pretty much to nothing. All right? By 1803, the war starts in 1801. By 1803, the U.S. has been basically blockading Tripoli Harbor, and not doing a very good job of that either, because Tripoli Harbor has a lot of shoals that protect it. And the U.S. has sent these big warships to try to stop all of these Barbary corsairs from sailing in and out, but the Barbary corsairing vessels are very small and maneuverable, and they can just hug the coastline and get out and then come back in, and the U.S. is basically helpless to stop them. So Jefferson wants to see a change. A new man is put in charge named Commodore Preble. And Preble says, okay, you know what? I know we've got these really large ships. I don't care. Chase down those corsairs. You got to take them out. Because if you don't, they're going to continue to engage in this piratical activity. All right? Well, this isn't going to go so well. Because on Halloween 1803, Captain Bainbridge is in charge of the USS Philadelphia. And Bainbridge decides he's going to try to chase one of these corsairing vessels that is basically slinking in along the coast. All right? Well, this doesn't go over too well, and he winds up running it aground. It's one of the largest warships the United States had ever built up to that point, and now it's stuck in the harbor. The corsairs attack it. They capture all 400 U.S. sailors on board, including Bainbridge, and hold them as captives in Tripoli. Worse than that, they then turn the guns of the Philadelphia on the other American ships in the harbor. It's a complete disaster, and exactly something that you would expect out of probably a very novice country in terms of fighting a war like this. Let's bring in Stephen Decatur, because he's the first big hero of this first Barbary War. All right? How you liking these? Yes? No? Yeah? What's that? No. So, Stephen Decatur is tasked with destroying the Philadelphia. All right? Remember, it got stuck on the shoals on October 31st, Halloween 1803. And by February of 1804, the U.S. has had enough. So what they do is they come up with a cunning plan. Decatur has stolen a Tripoli corsairing vessel, a small one. He has then renamed it the USS Intrepid. Love Intrepid. Great word. What does intrepid mean? Fearless. It means fearless. So he has this little small vessel, and what he does is he's going to then sail up to the Philadelphia, get on board the Philadelphia through stealth, light its powder room on fire, and blow it to smithereens. By the way, Blackbeard was historically known for using the term smithereens. You don't hear it that much unless maybe you're watching an old episode of Scooby-Doo. I cannot get enough of the word smithereens. So every time I have a chance to use smithereens, I am going to. And so that's exactly what Decatur is tasked with. He's successful. All right? They blow up the Philadelphia and sail away in the Intrepid, having lost not a single American. All right? They don't lose anyone. This is a famous painting of the Intrepid there at the bottom, sailing away from the burning hulk of the Philadelphia. Huge victory for the US. In fact, British Admiral Horatio Nelson famously said when he heard about this act of daring that it was one of the most bold and heroic actions of the age. One of the most bold and heroic actions of the age. And it was carried out by Decatur. Decatur is instantly famous. All right? But the war is not over. Anything but. This leads us to another man by the name of William Eaton. William Eaton had been the U.S. consul to Tunis. All right? And Eaton despised the Barbary Corsairs. He was a diplomat, first and foremost, in charge of trying to handle negotiations with Tunis, one of the 3 Barbary regencies, and he did not like them. And so he hatches a plan to try to end the war once and for all. What does he do? Well, he decides that he's going to go work with Yusuf's older brother Hamid, who had been basically kept from the throne by his younger brother. Hamid was living in exile in Alexandria, Egypt. And so Hamid says, come on over, I'll get a bunch of mercenaries together, you come over, Eaton, and then we will do basically a march across the desert, 600 miles, to the second city of Tripoli, a city called Derna, and we will attack it and seize it. All right? This was the first time that the U.S. had tried to do anything on land in this war against Tripoli. And when Eaton goes there, he has 8 Marines and 2 Navy midshipmen with him. Hamid has 500 mercenaries. They're Greek, Arab, and Berber. They then march for 6 weeks across the desert. They have some naval support from Captain Hull. And they take them 6 weeks to get there. At one point, Hamid attempts a mutiny. Yes, he attempts a mutiny against Eaton. And they're going there to try to gain back control of Tripoli for Hamid. Eaton puts it down, probably thinking, what am I doing here? They then continue their march to Derna, and that's when the battle is going to begin. Now, it's a 3-pronged approach. Before the forces attack via land, they have the ships fire on Derna to try to soften it up, which they do a very good job of that. And then at an appointed time, Eaton, the 2 Navy midshipmen, and the 8 Marines will attack from the water's edge, and Hamid and the mercenaries will attack from the land side. Okay? Eaton, the 8 Marines and the 2 Navy midshipmen attack when they're supposed to. Hamid's a little bit slower to get going, but he does attack. And by 4 o'clock that afternoon, the city has been taken. Overall, the number of losses are 1 Marine dead, 2 more Marines wounded, and Eaton has suffered a musket shot through his wrist, but he fought through it. He is your first warrior diplomat, which you don't hear much of. All right? But they take the city. It's a huge success. And this gets Yusuf's attention. Because now, what's happening? Well, Eaton is planning to go and attack Tripoli, the capital city. Right? It's like New York, New York. It's Tripoli, Tripoli. But he's not going to get the chance. Because Jefferson decides that it's time to end this war, stop spending money, and that's what he will do. By the way, this is a artist rendering of the Battle of Derna. All right? There's Eaton for you. Looks very dashing, doesn't he? Yes. There's the smile, or the smirk, I should say. Smirk from beyond. Eaton is incensed that he isn't able to finish the job. He goes back to DC and is constantly complaining about needing to go back and finish off the Barbary Corsairs once and for all. I said, if you'd just let me do my job, I would have been able to take them out, and if I had taken out Tripoli, Tunis, and Algiers would have fallen in short order. No one wants to hear this from Eaton, and he's basically shunned. He will take to drinking heavily and will die of alcoholism in 1811. Sad story. Anyhow, let's bring up James Madison. For those of you who don't know James Madison, other than the fact that there's a university named after him, you should know that he is one of the most successful of the founding fathers. He's heavily involved in the writing of the Constitution, and he has a very successful two terms as president. He follows on the heels of Jefferson, all right? He is Jefferson's right-hand man. He's also the shortest U.S. president in history, coming in at 5 feet 4 inches tall, and never weighed more than 100 pounds. But it doesn't matter, because he carries a really big stick. All right? So Madison is charged, first of all, when he comes into power with there still being all of these issues with the Barbary Corsairs. The British are constantly harassing U.S. shipping as well. In fact, at one point, Madison calls the British pirates for the way they're behaving. And he's not far off. All right? Madison, by the time we get to 1812, he's had enough. He's had enough. He can't stand the British constantly attacking U.S. shipping and impressing American sailors to serve on Royal Navy vessels. All right? And so he said that this British system of monopoly and piracy needed to come to an end. And he goes to Congress, and he gets Congress to declare the War of 1812. The United States is back at war with the British. Now, for the first couple of years, it's not really that big of a deal because the British are preoccupied with Napoleon. But soon, it will be problematic because once the British are pretty much finished with Napoleon, or they think they're finished with Napoleon, they are going to launch an all-out assault and wind up burning the White House to the ground. So that's a problem. But the British are tired of war. They've been fighting Napoleon for over a decade. They've spent so much money out of their treasury. They just want it to come to an end. As a result, so the British and the Americans both decided about the same time, let's do peace negotiations. Let's end this war. And they come up with a treaty to end it, the Treaty of Utrecht. However, before that can happen, before word gets back to the U.S. that the treaty has been signed, what's going to happen? Well, there's going to be the Battle of New Orleans, led by Andrew Jackson. Yeah? Okay. Andrew Jackson is one of the vilest people on the planet. But you really have to kind of get more into his backstory, and we're not going to do that. Anyhow, he wins the Battle of New Orleans against the British forces. It's a massive victory for the United States. And as a result, it makes the U.S. feel as if they'd really, truly won the war. All right? Immediately after, there's this sense of great patriotism that's coursing through the veins of every American. And what does Madison do? Well, he decides he's going to outfit 2 flotillas and declare war on the Barbary Corsairs. Now, the Battle of New Orleans is January of 1815. By February the 17th, 1815, he's asking for a declaration of war on Algiers. On March the 3rd of 1815, that is granted to him. All right? So, by March 20th, a flotilla of 20 ships led by Stephen Decatur is leaving New York Harbor on its way to the Mediterranean to hunt down and end the Barbary scourge, trying to end this piracy once and for all. He had 10 ships in his squadron. He makes good time heading over to the Mediterranean, and 2 days after he enters the Mediterranean, he encounters the major Algerian admiral named Reis Hamida. It's a 25-minute engagement. The engagement ends when Reis Hamida is cut in half by a cannonball. That was not one of the points where I was expecting a laugh, but okay. I'll take it. 400 Algerians were taken prisoner and sent to Cartagena. Then 2 days after that, Decatur and the Americans overwhelm a 22-gun Algerine ship called the Esterio, and another 80 prisoners are on their way to Cartagena. He then starts sailing directly for, you guessed it, Algiers, to demand the end of the U.S. paying tribute. He makes it to Algiers, and when he gets there, he encounters the new leader of Algiers, a man by the name of Omar the Agar. Omar agrees to the American demands. The U.S. will no longer pay tribute, right? And they will stop attacking American shipping in the Mediterranean. He then sails on to Tunis. He demands the same thing out of Tunis, plus he demands $60,000 in restitution for 2 ships that the Tunisians had been harboring for the British, that the British had taken during the War of 1812. They willingly pay it. Now he's off to see his old buddy Yusuf Karamanli in Tripoli, which he does. He demands the same things from Yusuf, plus he says to Yusuf, you will release every slave from every country that you hold currently in your city. Yusuf agrees. Not another shot is fired. He then sails back to New York City, where he arrives on the 12th of November, 1815, and he's given a ticker tape parade. What I didn't tell you is that about a month after the sailing of Decatur, you get the sailing of Bainbridge with 17 U.S. ships to support Decatur's first 10. All right? Bainbridge gets over there, and there's nothing to do. He basically is doing a tour of the Mediterranean where no one is firing on him, and this is not the best thing for Bainbridge because he was still smarting from having been imprisoned from the Philadelphia debacle all those years before. But there's nothing to do. Decatur has literally done it all. All right? Now, so, this is the end of the Barbary Corsairs. The United States, this fledgling country, had only been in existence for a few decades at this point, and they had done what the other Europeans had failed to do in 300 years: take out the Barbary Corsairs, end this piracy in the Mediterranean. All right? They had failed to do it, but the United States had succeeded, and this shocks Europe. Not only does it shock Europe, but it gives the United States an even greater sense of its destiny. They believed that they truly were going to be a powerful country, and given time, maybe the most powerful country that the world had ever known. The 300 years of systemic piracy had come to an end in the Mediterranean, and soon thereafter, the Barbary states will begin to topple. Europeans will come in and take them over and make them part of their colonies. All right? Which leads us to piracy today and what the United States is attempting to do to stop it in all of its forms. This is a chart of piratical activity around the world from 2019 to 2022. It shows, as you can see, attempted attacks, boardings, ships that are fired upon, ships that are hijacked, and suspicious vessels. All right? There is still a lot of piratical activity, especially in places like the Gulf of Aden and in the South China Sea. If you take Piracy Through the Ages, I'll tell you all about South China Sea pirates. But that lecture is definitely rated R. Now, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. So, as you can see, there's a lot of activity, also a lot of activity off the west coast of Africa, especially around Nigeria, right? In the oil fields that are just off the coast. But again, still a lot of just regular, good old-fashioned piracy. Right? And what is it? It's an economic activity. And what drives piracy? Usually, it's economic inequality. Right? When people are at their most desperate, they will take en masse to things like piracy, where they're stealing from the haves and giving to themselves. It always gets worse at the times of greatest inequality. All right? Then there's the issue of intellectual piracy, which really concerns the United States. I mean, the United States is concerned about old-fashioned piracy. I mean, it's in the Constitution after all. But the US has formed this group called the National Intellectual Property Rights Coordination Center. Wow, that's a long title. And from what I can tell by looking at it online, there are a lot of people working for this center. All right? It's a government agency. It's part of Homeland Security. All right? And you can see, this is just in fiscal year 2023. They initiated 623 cases of intellectual piracy. They arrested 434. I don't know if this is individual people or if it's groups. There were 327 indictments, 206 convictions, 2,444 seizure incidents, and seizures of $1.11 billion. Okay? Intellectual piracy is a major issue. Which brings us to Napster. When I was an undergraduate in the late 1990s, I know, way back when, Napster became a big thing. It was a peer-to-peer file sharing service, all right? Where, let's say I had an MP3, a music file of, I don't know, let's say AC/DC's Thunderstruck. And I put it on Napster, then anyone else who was on Napster could then access this MP3 and have it. They could download it and save it to their computer, which meant that they didn't have to buy a copy of it for themselves. All right? It was not necessary for them to buy it. This became a major legal struggle. The two musical acts that really went hard after Napster were Metallica and Dr. Dre. wanting to shut them down forever for piracy. Of course, Napster was constantly saying, we're not pirates. We've just created this community where people can go on and they can share their files, but we don't touch the files. So have we really engaged in piracy? We don't think so. We absolutely don't think so. Okay? The two founders are the two Seans, Sean Parker and Sean Fanning. And things are looking kind of up for Napster in the courts until a memo comes out from Sean Parker basically instructing the employees of Napster to whatever they're doing, right? Do not use the term piracy. The courts get a hold of this memo and they're like, look, they're admitting to piracy. They have to file for bankruptcy and they're basically shut down. Now, how many of you have seen the movie The Social Network? It's a great film, right? It's about the founding of Facebook. Well, in that movie, Justin Timberlake plays Sean Parker. Because after Sean Parker was a part of Napster, he got in on the early ground floor stages of Facebook. After that, he took some of the money he had made from Facebook and invested it in Spotify. Spotify, the technology in Spotify is very similar to the technology that was originally developed for Napster. But because it's subscription-based, the music industry doesn't have a problem with it. Problem with Napster was they didn't know how to monetize themselves. And as a result, it still exists. Napster still exists. But they did file for bankruptcy. The founders were pushed out of it. But you can still get on Napster today. The difference between Napster and Spotify is if you purchase a subscription to Napster, every song that's on there, you can download it. Spotify, it's a lot more difficult to do so. Okay? So, it's a fascinating tale. It's a tale where the United States is actively pursuing those who engage in what they see as intellectual piracy. But intellectual piracy is obviously something that is constantly on the minds of those in government, those in power. All right? Now, question for you. How many of you have ever listened to a song that you didn't purchase or watched a movie that you didn't buy? How many of you have maybe used a VPN to do this? Yeah. You know what you're admitting to, right? You're all pirates. You're all pirates, that's right. And I didn't even have to turn you to the dark side via this lecture. You'd already done it yourselves. It makes sense though. You're young college students. You don't have a lot of disposable income. You're in that economic danger zone area where piracy is going to be very appealing to you. So I get it. And that's why I'm here to mold you. When you've already engaged in piracy, you're just one step away from joining me. All right. So, the question that I want you to all ask yourself before you leave here today, I think you've already answered the first part, is, are you a pirate? And secondly, will you continue with your piratical ways going forward? Understood. I guess we'll see you in court. With that being said, I'd like to give a special thanks to the Department of History, to the Department of Political Science, Student Involvement and Engagement, Sydney Amell, who is here with us today. She was one of the people speaking up in the hype video. Vince Bagnulo, right here as well. Gracie Barrett, she was the one who you saw who had the class ring that has the Texas State on one side and it has the skull and crossbones on the other. Denise Bowler, Adam Clark, Alex Escobar, who put together that wonderful hype video. Jeff Helgeson, the chair of the history department. Jasmine Jennings-Rentz, who is here and introduced our student body president. Ella Lacey was also in the hype video. Taylor Morey, who helped with the hype video. Melissa Rendon, who is also here and helped with the hype video and everything about this lecture. And Lily Stanford, who was the final member of that hype video. I just want to say this has been Piracy and Presidents. Thank you so much for coming. I'm Dr. Bryan Glass, and welcome to Texas State.